Chapter 10 of the Talisman. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lizzie Driver. The Talisman by Sir Walter Scott. Chapter 10. And now I will unclasp a secret book, and to your quick conceiving discontent I'll read you matter deep and dangerous. Henry IV, Part 1. The Marquis of Montserrat and the Grand Master of the Knights Templars stood together in the front of the royal pavilion, within which this singular scene had passed, and beheld a strong guard of bills and bows drawn out from a circle around it, and keep at a distance all which might disturb the sleeping monarch. The soldiers wore the downcast, silent, and sullen looks with which they trail their arms at a funeral, and stepped with such caution that you could not hear a buckler ring or a sword clatter, though so many men in armour were moving around the tent. They lowered their weapons in deep reverence as the dignitaries passed through their files, but with the same profound silence. "There is a change of cheer among these island dogs," said the Grand Master to Conrade, when they had passed Richard's guards. "What hoarse tumult and revel used to be before this pavilion! Naught but pitching the bar, hurling the ball, wrestling, roaring of songs, clattering of wine pots, and quaffing of flagons among these burly yeomen, as if they were holding some country wake, with a maypole in the midst of them instead of a royal standard." "Mastiffs are a faithful race," said Conrade, "and the king their master has won their love by being ready to wrestle, brawl, or revel amongst the foremost of them, whenever the humour seized him." "He is totally compounded of humours," said the Grand Master. "Marked you the pledge he gave us, instead of a prayer over his grace cup yonder?" "He would have felt it a grace cup, and a well-spiced one too," said the Marquis, "were Saladin like any other Turk that ever wore turban, or turned him to Mecca at call of the muezzin. But he affects faith and honour and generosity, as if it were for an unbaptized dog like him to practise the virtuous bearing of a Christian knight. It is said he hath applied to Richard to be admitted with the pale of chivalry." "By Saint Bernard!" exclaimed the Grand Master, "it were time to throw off our belts and spurs, Sir Conrade, deface our armorial bearings, and renounce our burgonets, if the highest honour of Christianity were conferred on an unchristian Turk of tenpence." "You rate the Soldan cheap," replied the Marquis. "Yet, though he be a likely man, I have seen a better heathen sold for 40 pence at the bagnio." They were now near their horses, which stood at some distance from the royal tent, prancing among the gallant train of esquires and pages by whom they were attended, when Conrade, after a moment's pause, proposed that they should enjoy the coolness of the evening breeze which had arisen, and, dismissing their steeds and attendants, walked homewards to their own quarters through the lines of the extended Christian camp. The Grand Master assented, and they proceeded to walk together accordingly, avoiding, as if by mutual consent, the more inhabited parts of the canvas city, and tracing the broad esplanade which lay between the tents and the external defences, where they could converse in private and unmarked, save by the sentinels as they passed them. They spoke for a time upon the military points and preparations for defence, but this sort of discourse, in which neither seemed to take interest, at length died away, and there was a long pause, which terminated by the Marquis of Montserrat stopping short, like a man who has formed a sudden resolution, and gazing for some moments on the dark, inflexible countenance of the Grand Master, he at length addressed him thus: "Might it consist with your valour and sanctity, Reverend Sir Giles Amory, I would pray you for once to lay aside the dark visor which you wear, and to converse with a friend barefaced." The Templar half smiled. "There are light-coloured masks," he said, "as well as dark visors, and the one conceals the natural features as completely as the other." "Be it so," said the Marquis, putting his hand to his chin, and withdrawing it with the action of one who unmasks himself. "There lies my disguise. And now, What think you, as touching the interests of your own order, of the prospects of this crusade?" "This is tearing the veil from my own thoughts rather than exposing your own," said the Grand Master. "Yet I will reply with a parable told me by a Santon of the desert. A certain farmer prayed to heaven for rain, and murmured when it fell not as his need. To punish his patience, Allah, said the Santon, sent the Euphrates upon his farm, and he was destroyed, with all his possessions, even by the granting of his own wishes." "Most truly spoken," said the Marquis Conrad. "Would that the ocean had swallowed up 19 parts of the armament of these Western princes! What remained would be better have served the purpose of the Christian nobles of Palestine, the wretched remnant of the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem. Left to ourselves, we might have bent to the storm, or, moderately supported with money and troops, we might have compelled Saladin to respect our valour, and grant us peace and protection on easy terms. But from the extremity of danger with which this powerful crusade threatens the Soldan, we cannot suppose, should it pass over, that the Saracen will suffer any one of us to hold possessions or principalities in Syria, far less permit the existence of the Christian military fraternities, from whom they have experienced so much mischief." "Ay, but," said the Templar, "these adventurous crusaders may succeed, and again plant the cross on the bulwarks of Zion." "And what will that advantage either the Order of the Templars or Conrad of Montserrat?" said the Marquis. "You it may advantage," replied the Grand Master. "Conrad of Montserrat might become Conrad, King of Jerusalem." "That sounds like something," said the Marquis, "and yet it rings but hollow. Godfrey of Bouillon might well choose the crown of thorns for his emblem. Grand Master, I will confess to you I have caught some attachment to the Eastern form of government. A pure and simple monarchy should consist but of kings and subjects. Such is the simple and primitive structure, a shepherd and his flock. All this internal chain of feudal dependence is artificial and sophisticated, and I would rather hold the baton of my poor marquisate with a firm grip, and wield it after my pleasure, than the sceptre of a monarch, to be in effect restrained and curbed by the will of as many proud feudal barons as hold the land under the Assize of Jerusalem. The Assize de Jerusalem were the digest of feudal law, composed by Godfrey of Bouillon from the government of the Latin kingdom of Palestine, when reconquered from the Saracens. It was composed with advice of the patriarch and barons, the clergy and laity, and is, says the historian Gibbon, a precious monument of feudatory jurisprudence, founded upon those principles of freedom which were essential to the system. A king should tread freely, Grand Master, and should not be controlled by here a ditch, and there a fence, here a feudal privilege, and there a mail-clad baron with his sword in his hand to maintain it. To sum the whole, I am aware that Guy de Lusignan's claims to the throne would be preferred to mine, if Richard recovers, and has aught to say in the choice." "Enough," said the Grand Master. "Thou hast indeed convinced me of thy sincerity. Others may hold the same opinions, but few, save Conrad of Montserrat, dared frankly avow that he desires not the restitution of the kingdom of Jerusalem, but rather prefers being master of a portion of its fragments, like the barbarous islanders, who labour not for the deliverance of a goodly vessel from the billows, expecting rather to enrich themselves at the expense of the wreck." "Thou wilt not betray my counsel?" said Conrad, looking sharply and suspiciously. "Know for certain that my tongue shall never wrong my head, nor my hand forsake the defence of either. Impeach me if thou wilt. I am prepared to defend myself in the lists against the best Templar who ever laid lance in rest." "Yet thou startest somewhat suddenly for so bold a steed," said the Grand Master. "However, I swear to thee by the Holy Temple, which our order is sworn to defend, that I will keep counsel with thee as a true comrade." "By which temple?" said the Marquis of Montserrat.